Do you feel guilty when you're relaxing? Hi there, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Syra, the show where I answer your questions about mental health, personal development, and relationships. So today's question comes from Monique. Monique says, it's very simple. Why do I feel so guilty when I relax? Why do I feel so guilty when I relax? Can you relate to that question? Oh my goodness. Guilt and relaxation. I can totally relate to that. This is a journey I've been walking for a while. And so I want to share with you some of what I've learned. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is your conditioning. The second is our cultural stories of busyness. And finally, the concept of earning rest. So let's start with conditioning. So when you feel guilty to rest, whose voice is whispering in your head? See, kids do not feel bad about resting. They'll just laze around, do whatever they want, relax, and it's natural for them to do that. It's also natural for them to run around and get into stuff and be creative. It's also natural for them to rest. At some point in our development, I can speak as a mom, kids get chores and kids get tasks and kids get things that they have to do. And sometimes in some families, resting is not really an option for children. I know when I was growing up, we were out of the house most of the time and like playing with neighborhood kids or whatever. But if we were home, we were probably doing some chores if my mom was home, right? We were helping, we were kind of doing stuff. We weren't gonna, the other day I was vacuuming and my husband was sitting on the couch and he lifted his feet up. And I just thought about if we were ever to do that at my home growing up, like nobody's sitting on the couch when someone else is vacuuming. Everybody's up doing stuff. And so this thing about how dare you sit there and relax while I'm doing all this hard work, that's the voice in my head, right? Of like, that's the conditioning that you should be doing something. Why are you just sitting around not doing anything? So that voice over time, we condition ourselves to that voice, and that's the voice. We call it, as a grown-up, guilt. I feel guilty because I'm not doing anything and I'm just relaxing and resting. And how could I do this? So it comes from somewhere. So it's interesting to think about, where does the voice come from in you? That you shouldn't be resting. It's not okay to rest. There's something wrong with you if you're relaxing. So just ask yourself that question. It could be generations, right? I know for a lot of immigrant families, rest wasn't really an option when the family first came to the new country. And so everybody worked and people were tired, but they worked through that and somehow kept going, and often like in the middle of, all kinds of physical illnesses still keep going. And rest, relaxation wasn't on the table as an option. So you might have just grown up never seeing anyone relax, really. Right? The times that I remember seeing people relax in my family was at like family get-togethers, right? But even then, I know like my mom and my aunt, they were like fluttering around in the kitchen and they were doing stuff and they're, entertaining and hosting. And so even at get-togethers like that, nobody's just sitting around. I mean, there were some people sitting around and we judged those people, but nobody was sitting around. So that's the first thing, is to ask yourself, this is a conditioned behavior, conditioned mindset, and where does that come from? So that's the first. Second, is I want to address this cultural narrative that we have in North America specifically about busyness. This is something very interesting and unique to American Canadian culture, because I've been to places around the world where busyness is not as prized as it is here. It's just simply not. Everyone's not striving to be busy and proud of themselves for how busy they are. Life has a different pace. There's different priorities. I remember being in Australia. I'll never forget this. And there was it was like 4:30, and there was this guy in his suit walking down the street so fast, right? And I was like, oh, he's probably going to a meeting or something. He's like walking so fast down the street, like just almost like running to get wherever he was going. And he went into this building, and we were shopping a little like market nearby. And so, I noticed when he came out of the building, it's like, oh, it was quick. It was just maybe like 10 or 15 minutes. He came out of the building And he was in surf shorts and a t-shirt, and he was holding his surfboard. So his rush was to get to the waves. Like, that's what he was rushing around for, so that he could go and surf. And it just, that moment just like clicked something in me, like, oh, what? Like, you're leaving work a little bit early so that you can go surf, and everyone's okay with it. Like, culturally, it's like, okay, yeah, obviously. Like, and now I don't know Australian culture. I was only there for a visit, but that moment like really like, you know, switched my mind. Also, I visited places where people take a long break for tea in the middle of the day a couple times, and the conversation with each other is more valuable than the item, you know, the task being done. I've noticed that in the small town that we've moved to, right? There's a different emphasis on relationships rather than tasks. Tasks come second, and conversations and relationships come first. A simple example is taking my dog for a walk. And so I'll walk the neighborhood, and if there's neighbors out, I'll stop and talk. And so I can't really say I only have 10 minutes for a walk, or I only have 20, because I know that I might be 20 minutes, I might be an hour, it depends on who's out and who wants to talk. It's a different way of looking at priorities, right? And we have this cultural narrative of it's good to be busy, and you should be busy, and if you're not busy, you're probably lazy. So if that's your narrative, of course you're going to feel guilty when you're relaxing. Because everyone else is so busy, why should I get a chance to relax? Am I going to be the one who puts up their feet as somebody else vacuums underneath me? Like, right? So that's another thing, is to really challenge this cultural narrative that busyness is the ideal. I remember when I was a super busy person, and I would almost take pride in that. Like, people would ask me, how are you doing? I'd be like, oh, I'm so busy. And then I would go on to tell them all the things I was doing that were busy. And one time a friend said to me, she said, you know, you don't have to do all that stuff, right? I'm like, yes, I do. I have to have my kids in scouts, and I have to have them in swimming lessons, and I have to be able to volunteer to, and she said to me again, like, you know, you don't have to do any of that stuff, right? You're making choices. And it's like a bomb dropped in my heart, because I was like, oh yeah, I've bought into this idea that we got to be go, 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 and that rest is wrong. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and this is super important, is that it also feels like we have a cultural story about earning rest. Like, you're not allowed to rest if you've earned it. What? So you work hard for 5 days and you grind and you push maybe 6 days, and then you earned sitting down for a few hours on the weekend. You push for 50 weeks of the year, you go, and then you've earned your 2 weeks to relax. And many people just get sick during that 2 weeks because the body's decompressing. Don't even enjoy your holiday, right? So this idea of rest being earned, that's also messed up, right? I was talking to a client the other day about this, and we were, you know, I was giving him the example of prison. Like, even in prison, there's a bedtime. Like, okay, we're done. You need to rest now. Go to sleep. It's like a human, like, just to be a functional human, you need rest. And even the prison system knows that. And yet we don't allow ourselves rest. Like, what is happening here? And rest, I don't just mean sleep, right? I don't just mean getting a full, good, thorough night's sleep. I also mean resting through the day, taking breaks, relaxing, slowing down the pace of how quickly we think things need to be done. So rest is a right, I would say. You know, at a certain point in your life development, you could say, like, rest is my right. I think it's a human right to be able to rest. I think if we're not resting, we're really robbing ourselves of something. And I understand, like, in some contexts, there isn't much room for rest, like I mentioned before, right? Growing up with my, you know, the poverty that we lived in, and it, like, rest wasn't really an option. But I'm not living that way anymore. It's a different time now. And so can I change my thinking to catch up with the time that I'm in? So those are my thoughts about why we feel guilty when we relax. So first of all, we've been conditioned. Whose voice is that in your head? Second, there's a cultural story of busyness. And third, the belief that I need to earn my rest. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have a question, feel free to email me. Email's at the end of this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.